Hello, everybody. If you're watching this and you're wondering why I'm wearing a Batman shirt, it's because today it's Halloween as we're filming. And I am super excited because we have the CEO of Synergy Blue Games, George Washington, here. George, the timing is perfect because I saw that you guys just announced a new distribution deal with Real Games, which is going to put Synergy Blue Games on cruise ships, in the Caribbean, and all the places where URComped is sending tons of players. So this is great. I'm excited to talk to you. So first of all, George, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you.
So George,
Great
why don't we start by giving us the backstory of, actually, I'd love to hear kind of your backstory and just the genesis of Synergy Blue.
Okay. I started a company called Synergy Information Solutions over 10 years ago, and it was an infrastructure company that dealt with Cisco and phone systems, etc., for Native American casinos throughout the country. And so we dealt with all the casino infrastructure, and we dealt with IGTs, the Scientific Games, Aristocrat. And while we were doing that, we sort of came up with this idea, well, why don't we get into the software business? We like the idea of, building stuff and pushing it out there. So it made sense. So we started building some relationships with the major manufacturers, and we got into a discussion and decided to start up Synergy Blue. And we started Synergy Blue about 7 years ago, and what we dealt with was service window type of applications and promotional games. And what service window is, it's like a picture-in-picture or a second display on the slot cabinet that provides promotional marketing, games, concepts, etc., as well as you can order drinks through it and look at the weather and all those types of things. So we've been doing that for about 7 years. So we've been in the gambling industry since day one with Synergy Blue. The original application developers that we had were all game developers, and they're like, well, we want to build real games, and we want to build, games, shoot 'em games, and fun, Xbox style games and arcade games, etc. And we're like, you know what, let's give it a go. And this was several years ago, actually about 5 years ago, and we're like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea, but how do we do that? And so we looked at all the different, all the current legislation that was out there at the time, and nothing really catered to skill at that point. And so we started looking and going, well, how can we make it at least entertaining for the players and for a different demographic? And we turned around and we're like, look, let's make it really simple. Let's just make the gambling aspect pure chance. So just like a regular slot machine, real spin, you either win or you lose, and depends on how much, of course. But we wanted to make that interaction, the game entertainment aspect, like a real arcade game or a Xbox game or a social game. And that's how HOG started, which is our hybrid arcade wager gaming platform. And we were compliant in most jurisdictions by doing that method, which is a little unique for the skill-based area. And so that's how we started with the games. The games evolved after that, and so did the platform, to become more flexible and be able to do skill and pure chance, so that we could be in more markets that don't do skill. And what we mean by that is you can walk around and let's pick a game. Let's say it's a zombie style game. The game itself is exactly the same, whether it's skill or chance. It's just the gambling mechanics behind it that change. So that's how we evolved the HOG platform. Then about 5 years ago, we were acquired by a local Native American tribe, and we started getting a little bit bigger and bigger. Originally, I founded Synergy Blue, and then in the last 2 years, we've grown significantly, and we started to push our games out to a local casino just to trial it, make sure that we're happy with it. Make sure that everything's stable, the math works, all those types of things, to make, before we go out to really push a sales market. Last thing we want to do is push a game that's not really ready. So we've done that. We've been through, a gamut of tests and, obviously compliance and those types of things. And now we're at that point where we've gone through distribution. We're looking at distributors, and that's how we came up with Real Games, who caters for the Caribbean, the cruise ships, and Florida. And Sean and his team there are one of the leaders in that market, and it was a great fit.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for that. And I want to, if you don't mind, we could go back even further because I'm real curious because you said, all right, well, we started a company where we do infrastructure for casinos, and now you have an accent that doesn't sound like a Southern California, somebody that grew up on the reservation. So,
Yeah.
tell us so you came from Australia, correct? Okay. So, give us a little more backstory because I know starting URComped, it's casino industry can be a tough one to get into, and working on infrastructure for casinos, that's got to be even more difficult to get into. So fill us in on that if you don't mind.
I think it all dates back to the fact that my name's George Washington. So
it was destiny.
having a very American name, it was always a compelling reason to come to the States. I was an exchange student in Wisconsin, and I did summer schools in New York, and that's sort of how I ended up here. Was during summer schools, one of the executive team that was speaking at the summer school said I should, really look at, joining the company there, and it was hospitality. And I said, oh, that sounds great. So I ended up going, what would be great? And I remember all the movies about Palm Springs and all the parties and all those. This was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this would be great. So I ended up here. Obviously, by the time I got here, those parties had long gone. And but I had a great job, and that's sort of how it evolved. And I never really left. So I ended up working, with a couple of different hospitality companies. I ended up being an IT director of one of the casinos, and then basically that evolved into my own business. And we then spread out from California into Oklahoma and so forth. But that's the big gist of how I ended up here.
Oh, that's fascinating. Okay, that makes sense. So you were working in IT, you saw where the needs were, and you're like, shoot, if nobody else is going to build a company to solve these problems, I better do it.
Yeah, it's a very, as you said, it's not an easy market to get into. There is a high barrier of entry, whether it's infrastructure, software is even higher because you have a much higher compliance hurdle to overcome. And then, of course, your licensing aspects, and those things, those things bleed into why skill hasn't penetrated the market as fast as everybody would think it would. The main, as we talked about before, all our competitors and us, we're not these big global companies like, IGT and Scientific Games, Aristocrat. We have to go through each jurisdiction and license and go through compliance, and those things all take time. And that's why we haven't really seen a major push. It's coming. Those things take time for us.
Now, it's interesting, you're right, because when I went to G2E this year, there was you guys, which I loved your games, by the way. That's why I wanted to make sure to talk to you. I thought they were the most entertaining of the skill-based games that were there. But there was you, there was Gamblet, there may have been one other. But then, notably, the IGTs, the Aristocrats, the 800-pound gorillas of the industry don't have skill-based games. Now, do you think that they're kind of waiting to see where it all plays out, or are they waiting to see which of the smaller companies becomes the market leader and they try to buy them, and that's how they get in the market? Or why do you think they haven't jumped in yet?
I think, as you said, they are the 800-pound gorilla. So it's hard to move that ship, especially from a development point of view. And then, of course, it is a patent minefield as well out there. But to answer the question probably more directly, I think they're all watching. Traditionally, the gaming industry is very slow to adapt, to move forward, and especially to adopt new technology. And what we what we've seen in the past is they're either fast followers or slow followers, but they're generally a follower. They'll see what works, and then they would probably go, okay, that's a great idea. We're going to use that method and sort of take the market that way.
Okay, very cool. So, what do you think sets you apart? Because you did mention a couple of and I did too, a couple of the competitors. What do you think sets you apart from the other companies trying to tackle skill-based gaming?
Well, I mean, we're all trying to end with the same goal, and we're all fairly, we all talk with each other. The competitors do. I think the big difference for us is obviously we started in chance, meaning that we can go into jurisdictions like Europe that are that are regulated, that probably won't allow skill for quite some time, or even some of the parts of the US that haven't adopted skill yet. So we can already hit those target markets. In general, there's only slight differences, in gameplay and so forth. But how we've sort of looked at it is, we like the arcade feel. We like the fact that the input devices are easy to understand. A couple of years ago, everybody was trying the Xbox controllers and trying to go with that. It pretty much wasn't. It wasn't accepted as well as what I think everybody would hope, because it's a lot easier to put an Xbox controller than a gun or a steering wheel and a joystick and so forth. You got one device, but it's a high barrier of learning entry, and so we wanted to sort of hit that the demographic of baby boomers all the way down to X and Y and millennials, and doing that. We figured the easiest way is going with a plain old joystick and going with a steering wheel or a gun or a trackball, because it's very easy to understand. People already know it. We're not really teaching anybody how to use those things. Even when I jump on an Xbox and I play games, you still got a little bit of learning experience to know how your movement's going to go, and when you're dealing with money. You don't want to be learning how to use the controls. And so we wanted to make that as easy as possible.
That's a great point. And the people that actually have the disposable income to gamble, I think they're still at a generation where they maybe didn't play a ton of Xbox. I'm in my mid-30s, and I'll say I'm in my mid-30s till I'm 39, and then I'll late 30s. But anyway, I'm in my mid-30s, and it's been a while since I personally played Xbox. But I know, to your point, I could walk up and play with a shooter or play with a driving game, just because I grew up playing arcades and it's real just intuitive, whereas that would be intimidating for me, something with an Xbox control, to pick back up, and especially if I'm wagering on it. So I think that's a smart strategy you're taking.
Oh, thank you. I mean, we really wanted to sort of hit that fun for everybody. I mean, you might not like one game, but we have a multitude of games with different input devices that may fit you.
And do the other competitors have backing from casinos or from tribes? Because I think when I think about it, that's a nice advantage it seems like you have, where one of your investors owns a casino where you have an automatic test bed. They have patience to let you put in different games and see what works and what doesn't. Whereas if somebody didn't have it, they gotta, they put some games in, they're praying that it works. Otherwise they're out and their test bed goes away.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that it is a big benefit for us, and it definitely helps us trial and see what works. And as you said, if it doesn't work, we can adjust and retry again. And it's great having a patient casino when you're trying to build new things.
Has there been any games that you put in at the casino, or anything that was like a eureka? Oh my gosh, this is, maybe something you were like, all right, let's roll this game out, and there was just a huge learning experience. Anything that pops out?
Yeah, our Safari Match game was very successful. Actually, a lot more than I thought we'd get a good reaction to it, but it did very well. It was one of those games that even the demographic adjusted over time. It was a really interesting thing to watch. And what the Safari Match is, it's a Connect 3 or more type of game. very if somebody's played any of the social media games like Candy Crush or Bejeweled or those types of games, it's very similar to that. And a lot of our demographic through the season, what we have, we're in a very retirement-heavy area here. So our snowbirds that come in from from Canada and Washington and Oregon, um, they're very mobile savvy, and so they jump on it. They play the game for actually extended periods of time, which was another thing that was very exciting to see. People are sitting there for 4.5 hours sometimes, and we know that because we were there to sort of look at it and see how it was going. We're like, okay, we wanted to see what the performance was, but we could never get on the game because it was always busy. So we thought that while it's not a like one of our zombie games or driving games from a drawing in the crowd, it was a great performer. And we were really happy with that genre of game. And I think with that game, it is a transitional game. So it works with, your contemporary baby boomers all the way down.
It's very interesting. And maybe if you could elaborate a little more, you touched on it, and I'm slow. I'm from Texas. It takes me, but like the skill versus chance, you said that it's really like, from if I just walked up to the game, it would look the same and feel the same, but the back end is different on games that are skill versus chance. Am I understanding that right? Or maybe you could elaborate a little more on skill versus chance.
It's so how we explain it is, let's say it's a Connect 3 style game, like a Bejeweled, Candy Crush, etc. type game, and you connect the three. What happens is, in a pure skill-based version, actually in both versions, it's just like pressing a slot machine button. So if you think about, you connect the three, it's like pressing that big red button and it spins the reels. And that's really what we mean by pure chance, is all of that mathematics behind it is based upon slot machine mathematics. What happens with skill, though, there's portions of it that get allocated into how well you're doing during that game type. So let's say you get 3 stars at the end of the level for the Connect 3 style game. You have a much better return to player percentage because you've done better. So it's like playing video poker in that sense, is that the better hands you choose, obviously the better bonus or the higher the return to player becomes. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does, yeah. So if I'm playing just pure chance, I connect 3, it doesn't affect the hold percentage, my potential to win. It's just basically like it's spinning a reel. Whereas if I'm really good at it on the skill-based side, my odds to win go up.
Exactly. And we show this really well with our driving game. We especially at the show where you were, we have one that actually has a 3-reel, 1-line slot machine that sits in the middle of the dashboard, and every time you collect a coin, it spins the reels. And then I take people over to the skill base to show them how that works. But we always like to start with the pure chance way of doing things, because it's very easy to explain to somebody that it's really a glorified button in pressing a slot machine.
Now, getting back to the big announcement today of your partnership with Real Games, which it sounds like was actually finalized at G2E, or the preliminary agreement, but we're announcing it today. So maybe you can educate me and the people watching, listening, about like how does it work? So you're a developer, you're creating the games, then there's distributors. I'm picturing it kind of like the liquor industry, at least in Texas, where there's, Jim Beam is making it, and then there's Benny Keith is distributing it to stores, which are like the casinos. Or maybe you can kind of break it down how that works. The casino, the distributor, and the producer or the developer.
Yes, so we build the software and the hardware, and then we ship it down to wherever it's going to be. So for the cruise lines, obviously a lot are based out of Florida. So we would ship it down to Florida. They would go through a thorough testing of their own for, I guess, seaworthiness, as well as obviously the gambling aspects of it. And then once they're happy with it, they would then, and this happens with most casinos, they end up trialing out the game on a smaller number. So we are in talks with a particular cruise line. They'll test out the games, and then they'll place that on 3 ships with a smaller footprint, and they'll trial it. If it's successful, they'll add it to the rest of the fleet type of scenario. In Florida and the Caribbean, how those work is you've got to go through some jurisdictional compliance, and then it will go out on a casino floor. And how we look at it with skill-based games, being that it's a little bit different to traditional games, is you'll hear this from our competitors as well. We like to have a sort of segmented area, not so much physically segmented, but a particular area where it's more conducive to a skill-based style game. So if you put us in, if I put a skill base, and it doesn't matter who it is, from whether it's competitors or us, in the middle of a slot floor, you're not going to get that younger demographic wandering through a slot floor to play a game in the middle of a 1,000 slot machines. But if we go near the bars or near lounges, those types of things can be quite good, or near the areas like the front areas, generally where you see the demographic that you're going after.
That makes sense. And I'm just picturing on a cruise ship, I think you guys are going to do amazing, because they always put these, there's always some dumb games, where it's like put the quarter in and hopefully it pushes off the roll of bills, and it's stuff that people that leave the show, they walk through the casino, it's something that's not intimidating or looks kind of familiar, and they just plunk money into it. And I imagine if it's something where it's like your game, where it looks just like Candy Crush they're used to, if they're not, slot machines don't appeal to them, but it's like, oh, I just played this before I got on the ship 2 days ago, let me try this. I think it's going to be a great draw on a cruise ship.
Yeah, I think so as well. And what we see normally, actually, with all our games, because it's something unknown, they normally throw $1 or a couple of dollars in the machine and try it out. And then you see them put another couple of dollars in, and then they get comfortable, and then they put a little bit more money in, and then they can start really getting into it. Because at the end of the day, whether it's any of our competitors or not, the better you play, the better the odds are for the player. And we looked at it as we've discussed before, as arcade style games. We would used to put quarter, for me it was 20 cents, but for our Americans, it's quarters or dollars in the machine, and you would just keep pumping it in so you could get through the levels. And we've sort of combined that with the gambling aspect, of course, but we've kept that excitement in there.
And are the games set up where you can put a player's card in, you're earning points as you're playing your game, same as you would on an IGT game?
Yeah, so they're compliant with basically all the player tracking systems.
And with the distributors like Real Games, do the giant manufacturers, they own their own distributorship? Like in IGT, they distribute their own games because they're so big. Is that generally how it works?
Generally, that's the case. With Real Games, there's another large distributor called and Sean would probably be the best person to speak about this from Real. But they're the main distributor for EGT, which is a European, a large European slot manufacturer. So some of them will, but generally the big giants like IGT, Aristocrat, and Scientific Games, they've got their own. They've already spent the money in every jurisdiction and got their licenses and compliance all sorted. So they just do it themselves.
Yeah, it makes sense. They've got the budget to treat them all, for the massive dinners at G2E and the cocktail parties.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, very cool. Well, I learned a ton. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you?
I think you sort of hit a little bit of everything, which is great. We're excited to be in that market. I think we're going to show that we got a bit of everything for everyone. And I'm looking forward to maybe seeing some winners on your show.
Yeah, no, on URComped, we got 98% of our business is going in the Caribbean or going to cruise lines. So I'm excited to hear our customers are they're gonna watch this, and they're gonna bragged to us about how they hit a jackpot on one of your skill-based games. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Me too.
Well, thanks so much, George, and I'm looking forward to maybe checking back in a couple months, and hear about where our players can find your games.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.